What is going on, gunfighters? Welcome back to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about guns and gunfighting with God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. Today we're going to be talking about a pretty big topic. Big bore semi-auto battle rifles. I guess just big bore battle rifles sounds better. People like alliteration. Big bore battle rifles. Sounds manly, doesn't it? It almost should be an episode of the Alpha Male podcast. But I digress. We're on Gunfighter Life. That's what today's going to be about. I kind of broke it up into two categories, the Cold War era and the newer era of big bore battle rifles. You want to check out more, want to be a bigger part of the show than just listening, to be an active rather than a passive member of Gunfighter Life, check out goodshepherdtraining.com, goodshepherdtraining.com. That's all I'll say about that. Plug in the bio, and then we'll get into the main topic. Who am I? A question we should all ask ourselves. I am, first and foremost, a servant of God, made in His very own image, a follower of Jesus Christ, a simple man called by God to the Great Commission to share the good news of Jesus Christ. Next, a little bit about my background and what God has allowed me to do and blessed me to do in life. Grew up what most would consider very poor in the backwoods of the southeastern and mid-Atlantic United States, hunting and fishing. Joined the Marine Corps at 17. Did a couple of combat tours in Iraq. So a decorated Marine Corps combat veteran. Infantry assaultman. After the combat tours, I was an urban warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. I also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. Also a veteran of law enforcement. I served with LAPD. I was a sworn peace officer, a cop for LAPD. I worked regular patrol assignments and more specialized assignments. One of those more specialized assignments was warrant service, fugitive recovery. Also had some other law enforcement roles. I am an FBI certified firearms instructor and been certified by another 3-letter government agency in a lot of firearms and training things. I've also been a private contractor, worked in the private sector, pertaining to tactics and gunfighting and protecting America from enemies foreign and domestic. I served as the commander of a tactical team to stop active shooters in a large metropolitan area. That was our primary mission, to stop active shooters, which sadly are a thing in America today. I've also been blessed to do quite a bit of competition shooting. Started my first formal competitions even before joining the Marine Corps at 17. I had won more shooting competitions than I can remember. I have competed in all manner of disciplines in shooting. I've been blessed to be a state rifle and pistol champion, West Coast regional champion. Like I said, been blessed to win more shooting competitions than I can remember. Mentioned hunting. I've hunted to put meat on the table starting when I was a child. I've also been a professional big game hunter and guide, hunting and slaying all manner of beast. And I don't apologize for that. Humbled to be the host of 3 podcasts. Simple Man Sermons, Alpha Male Podcast, and Gunfighter Life. Obviously, as things not mentioned, I've been blessed to do many other things. But, again, first and foremost, I'm a servant of God, a believer and follower of the Bible, the Word, Jesus Christ. And I don't apologize for that. With that, let's transition into today's topic. Alright, gunfighters, are you ready to talk about big bore battle rifles? As you may surmise from my excitement, I'm rather happy to talk about this one. It's a cool topic. Two, I've been on a rather long road trip. As you may or may not know, I live semi-nomadically. My wife and the sidekick, Alexander Hamilton, are Rhodesian Ridgeback, traveling around the Pacific Northwest. Been living off-grid for quite a while, out in the middle of the wilderness, and now I find myself in a city, which I prefer less. I try to make the best of it. But it's a good escape from the road trip and from the hustle and bustle to talk about the world of big bore battle rifles. So let's talk about that. First caveat I'm going to give is, unless I specify otherwise, we're talking 308, 7.62 NATO. That's the opposite of 5.56, 223. 308 commercial like hunting ammo is actually loaded hotter or has a higher SAMI spec than 7.62 NATO does. But for all intents and purposes, most modern guns will fire both fine. If you blow yourself up, it is not my fault, it is your fault. With that, let's talk about them. We're going to start off with the Cold War era ones. One, because I don't want to blow through them, because I try and come at this from real-world first-hand experience, and there's only one that I have a lot of real-world first-hand experience with. I don't consider shooting one at the range or handling one actual experience. That's going to be the FAL. The first one we're going to talk about, the FAL. The right arm of the free world, adopted by a buttload of countries, but not us. Which means I didn't really have any exposure to this in the military. I was a poor boy growing up in the South prior to that, so I kind of missed that whole boat on the FAL. It is a great gun. There are lighter versions, but it's kind of a pig when it comes to weight. And there are a ton of variants, so weight varies. There's a lot of variations, but for argument's sake, let's say between 9 and 11 pounds without an optic. Box magazine fed shoulder fired weapon, I believe the standard is 20 rounds, which is pretty standard for 308 battle rifles. Very robust, very well made. You do, from what I understand, require adjustment of gas systems to cycle different kinds of ammo reliably. Optimally, let's say that. You could probably put it on the highest gas setting. With cycle, it might just beat up the gun and you a little bit more, but it has variable gas settings. Presumably a good feature if it's a rifle adopted by a ton of different countries with a bunch of variations in ammo. But the FAL, it's a good rifle. It's, by all accounts, a reliable rifle, a robust rifle. It is, however, hindered by the inability to easily mount optics. You can mount an optic on just about anything. Probably mount an optic on a high point if you really wanted to. High point pistol, that is. Yeah, I'm sure you could get the slide cut, mount an optic on it. It doesn't lend itself to that very well. Neither does the FAL. No, I'm not saying the FAL is a high point. The next one, the kind of the rival to this in the same era, the G3. The G3 I've handled them both. I like the G3 better personally. I like the sights on the G3. The G3 and HK91, for all intents and purposes, I'm not that big of a sommelier of these rifles to really know the practical differences in them. I said light, I guess it's a relative term. It still weighs 9.66 pounds, which is not a skinny girl. It does, in my opinion, feel sleeker. It does seem simpler. I like the design. And I also really like the book Patriots. I have a Rhodesian Ridgeback, but I do not run an HK91 or a G3. Never owned one. Think they're pretty robust, pretty reliable. They have, from what I understand, have worked on quite a few guns, a fairly simple operating system. I like simplicity. There's a reason I switched from carrying a folding knife to a fixed blade knife. Primarily simplicity. I like the simplicity. If I can get a rifle that works well, it's a simpler design that does, I don't know about as good a job, but I'm choosing between a couple of different designs, and one is me, the end user, as well performing but simpler. I'll lean towards the simpler. I'm that kind of person, especially in the survival and my time in combat and things like that. A lot of things break. it's a safe queen or something, that's fine. But if you're going to take it out and use it, if it's going to be hard times tool, generally simpler things break less. There's just less to break. Anyway, for those reasons, I would probably prefer the G3 to the FAL. Again, I've never owned either of them, so this is just from, handling. The G3, the HK91, good guns. The FAL saw a lot of service in that Cold War era. A lot of the smaller conflicts in places, Africa and places like that. So it's a battle-proven gun. Nothing wrong with either design. And there are, and again, I'm not a sommelier of the FNs or the FALs, but there are some versions that are fairly lightweight and compact. I did try to quickly look up the lightest weight version of the FAL, but there's so many different variations and people that have modded them and sold them on the aftermarket, surplus market, things like that. I couldn't really nail that down. I'd say a lightweight version is 10 pounds. That's still pretty heavy. Now let's get to the one that I have the most experience with as far as Cold War big bore battle rifles go. The M14/M1A, and I have I have experience with both, but actual M14s I have experience with, and the M1A I have experience with. I can't remember if it was my first or second actual competition rifle was an M14. I later bought an M1A. I don't own it anymore, if that tells you anything. I really like it. I have a lot of experience with it. I could literally still to this day take one apart and put it back together blindfolded very quickly. I understand them. I understand how they work. I understand their strengths and their weaknesses. I have a lot of experience with them. I don't know how many hours I've spent handling that rifle, using that rifle. What I like about it, it's a big piece of heavy-duty American warfighting hardware. So I like that. I like the, Parkerized steel wood stock kind of aesthetic. I'm just going to be honest with you. I like that. It's a rifle made for riflemen. I like that. I consider myself very blessed and humbled to be an expert rifleman. In fact, I was an expert rifleman in the Marine Corps. I like getting good hits at 500 yards with iron sights. Talking about features, probably my favorite feature of this rifle is the iron sights. The iron sights are superb. They are just a thing of beauty on this rifle. If you cut your teeth competition or precision shooting with iron sights, they're just fantastic. The sight radius is fantastic. The robustness of them, you could likely crack open walnuts with the front or rear sights and then go back to shooting, and I doubt you would have any issues. They are robust, beefy, protected sights. Both the front sight post and the rear aperture are well protected. They're robust. They have good adjustments, good positive adjustments. They're just fine, precise, simple instruments. The iron sights on those are awesome. I mentioned I like the G3 HK91 style of drum sight, and I do. It's a cool sight. I think the M14 sights are better. I think it has the best sights of any of these, at least iron sights, of any of these battle rifles. I like the flash hider on it. It might seem like a little thing, but I like it. I like the fact that it takes a bayonet. Talking about old school American hardware, I was trained with a bayonet and bayonet fighting. I like that. I like the fact that it takes a bayonet. I like this rifle as far as all that goes. That being said, I don't own one. It's heavy. It's a heavy rifle. I'm shooting it in competition or using it in competition or handling it in competition. That's not really a big deal. I walk up to the line or I shoot a stage or I go out and perform with it. It is what it is. I never used one in combat in Iraq. And I wouldn't have wanted to. That thing is heavy. Maybe if it was a vehicle op on a convoy or something, I'm sitting in the back of the vehicle. But I was a grunt. I was a ground pounder. I had too much crap as it is, let alone adding all that weight. So it's a big girl. And at 9.2 pounds is what it says for the M14. That's lighter than I was thinking, at least compared to the G3 and the FAL. They're still used today in a designated marksman role. But that's not what I had. I was actually issued an ACOG back before everybody was issued an ACOG. I think now pretty much everybody in the Marine Corps runs an ACOG, but when they were first coming out, they issued them to kind of who they selected as the best shooters or whatever. I did have one, and I was very blessed to have one. It's a good sight, 20-inch. I started out with an M16A2. I was later issued an M16, not an M4, but an M16A4, big difference, with an ACOG. It was a good gun. You know that I can't mention the M14 without mentioning it's still used today in a designated marksman role. I didn't use one in a designated marksman role. Would I have liked one? Yes, I would have. I was very familiar with that weapon. I would have liked it, again, caveat, if I was in a vehicle. I often was not in a vehicle. It's not like they just, like, hey, Corporal Melito, what weapon would you like to take out today? No. This is my rifle. There are many like it, but this one is mine. I'm not going to be like, which gun would you like to take out on patrol today? Your gun is your gun. Your rifle is your rifle. So for that reason, I'm glad I didn't have one of those. Maneuverability versus firepower is a real dilemma for the grunt, for the infantrymen in the Marine Corps and the Army. And again, I think you're loaded down with too much crap as it is. I think I was already far on the worst end of the spectrum on firepower versus mobility. Did a whole podcast on that if you want to listen to it. But that said, adding more weight, I don't think that was a better trade. If I could have got rid of a bunch of other crap I see as superfluous that I carried, maybe then I would have liked to carry the M14 over the M16A4, but that wasn't a choice that I had. Anyway, all that aside, it's still used today in a designated marksman role. It is still, at least I believe it's still used, I don't know what extent, as a kind of semi-automatic sniper rifle. You can debate what a sniper is or isn't. But the Mark 25, I was blessed to do a lot of things in the military, but I was not a sniper, and I'm not going to pretend that I was one. Don't have any first-hand experience with a Mark 25. But it is a thing, it does exist. A good point on that is that the M14 M1A can be very accurate. Now, your just regular M14, your M1A is not super accurate by today's standards. Probably talking a 2 or 3 MOA gun, but like a national match or an accurized one, they can get very accurate, but that takes a lot of work. But a fine rifle, and if I had to stick with the Cold War era battle rifles, I'd stick with the M14 or some derivative thereof. Alright, let's transition, and there's probably other big bore battle rifles of the Cold War. I'm not going to talk about Soviet stuff again. This is mostly 308 stuff we're going to talk about today. Though I do believe 2 of the rifles we're going to talk about, including the one we just talked about, are available in 6.5. The new 308, just like gray is the new black or whatever. 6.5 is kind of the new battle rifle cartridge. Now maybe it's going to be 6.8. Who knows? The old 270 from Jack O'Connor reborn. Anyway, let's not get down that rabbit hole. Let's talk about one that started out very much in the Cold War, but is very much modern. And in fact, it didn't see much adoption during the Cold War, and it's probably more popular today than it ever was then. You'll notice the AR-15 was a civilian designation of what became the M16. Well, the civilian designation of the AR-10 precedes it. Why is that? Well, because that gun was originally designed in 7.62 NATO. They came out with it later in an experimental varmint cartridge based on a 222 Remington or 222 Remington Magnum, I forget which. And that became the AR-15, but it was originally designed in 7.62 NATO as a full size, and that bigger guise of a battle rifle, a full-size battle rifle, instead of more of the scary assault rifle that we have today. But anyway, it was originally an AR-10 in 7.62. I think Portugal adopted it. There may have been some other smaller countries that adopted it. We didn't adopt it. Just poor timing, or the Army just wasn't ready to go that space age yet. When they were, they wanted a more intermediate cartridge. You can really nerd out about that kind of history stuff. That's really more of a Forgotten Weapons channel kind of thing if you want to dive into that. Anyway, just say that it wasn't 7.62 first. Although it came out in the Cold War in the 50s, it really hasn't become popular until fairly recently, until, kind of post-Cold War. There are a ton of AR-10 derivatives. The big drawback for the AR-10, the beefed up AR-15, is that Unlike the AR-15 that pretty much has a mil-spec standard, since we didn't adopt it, no major militaries adopted it, there is really no mil-spec pattern. There are a lot of companies that make AR-10s, and there are a lot of different components and size variations in AR-10. A bolt that works in one is not likely to work in another, even if they're both direct impingement DI guns. They don't even all take the same magazines. So there's a vast variation. So when you say AR-10, not like a lot of AR-15s where I could take my Colt 6920 upper and throw it on a Daniel Defense lower and call it good. The AR-10 world is not like that at all. So if you're going to build one or buy one, do your due diligence there. That being said, there are a ton of variations. There's no like standard M4 that you can pretty much base it on. Like there's no, I would consider the standard for the modern AR kind of the Colt 6920. There really isn't that for the AR-10. That being said, they're generally much lighter weight because they use more space-age materials. Kind of the whole reason behind the AR-10 and later AR-15. They use that lightweight aluminum, extensive use of polymers. So they are inherently lighter. You can make them as big and heavy as you want, throw a giant bull barrel on it, make it a sniper rifle. They don't have to be heavy, and you can make them. There's a vast variation in weight. You likely make one well under 7 pounds. Again, you could go heavy if you want. They can be far lighter than the ones we've talked previously. Also, since they've been brought in the modern era, just a straight flat top upper. Just like went to in the Marine Corps from the M16A2 to the M16A4, just a flat top upper. You can mount an ACOG on there, you can mount an EOTech with a magnifier, you could mount a super awesome Night Force super high power optic on there for super long range stuff. It's super. You could do all that. It's much more modular. Not as modular as the AR-15 because not as many companies make stuff for it and it's not as interchangeable, but a lot more modular than a lot of the other ones we've talked about. You can put optics on it. Some of them do use compatible components with AR-15, so all those are going to be very customizable. Let's say if it uses a standard AR-15 trigger group. There's a ton of aftermarket triggers, really good ones and some not so good ones. But you get all those options if you go with the AR-10. Also, if you're familiar with the Manual of Arms, as much as I like the M14 and I know its Manual of Arms very well, it is not as intuitive or ergonomic as the Manual of Arms for an M16 or, for that matter, an AR-10. So you get those better ergonomics. I don't have enough real experience again with the Fowler or the G3 to speak on their ergonomics. I don't know if they're as good as an M16 or very similar or more akin to like an M1 Garand M14 style. But the AR-10 really is kind of that modern ergonomics that most of us are used to. And again, since they're customizable, you can go the 308 route, which is a great route. Arguably maybe the best all-around cartridge. I wonder if Jeff Cooper was doing the battle rifle, if he was doing a scout rifle today, if he would still think the 308 was the best choice. But that being said, it's always a good choice. It's always a good all-around cartridge. For hunting, for defense, for apocalypting, for whatever. It's a great cartridge. Very flexible. You could get it in a 6.5 if you want. I don't know if anybody makes it on the market, but you could likely get one in 243, which would be awesome. You could get it if you want to put a custom barrel on it. Pretty much anything in that standard short action size you could probably get and make work. You might have to mess around with gas port size and things like that, but you could likely make it work. Anyway, that's the AR-10, and again, there's no standard, so I can't talk a lot about it because there's no it. There's a bunch of them. Let's talk about the one that I have selected as my go-to. And I've said this before, I'm going to make one of the patrons upset, but I consider it my modern scout rifle. It weighs 7.7 pounds, is, at least mine, sample size of 1, is ridiculously accurate. If it was a bolt gun, I think it's probably more accurate than most of my really nice bolt guns. I only own 2. Not a gun collector, I'm a gun fighter. A professional hunter, but I do believe it's probably more accurate than either of my nice Kimber bolt rifles, and they're accurate, but my Scar is crazy accurate. It's insane accurate, like one ragged hole accurate, and it weighs 7.7 pounds, and it's a box magazine fed 20 round gun. Downside is it was very expensive. I think they're even more now, I sold several guns, raising up capital to get that gun. At the time, I was a professional gunfighter. I was let's say, in the private sector, let's just call it that. Also, the commander of a tactical team to stop active shooters and use that gun. And I thought that other people's lives and my life was worth it. So I saved up and I sold several guns. Again, not a gun collector, I'm a gunfighter. Much as I like my old lever action 45 long Colt, probably wasn't using that in an active shooter situation. So anyway, I settled on the SCAR. I wanted one for a long time. God blessed me with one. I still have it. My wife and I got some good quality time in. That's one of her love languages. Camoing it, buying stencils and painting it. Again, it's not a Safe Queen. It gets used. It's been used quite a bit. I would have no problem hunting with it. Again, I have bolt guns that are kind of my go-to, my guide rifle for that, for when I was a professional hunter and guide. He said, hey, I'm going to give you an elk tag or a bear tag or a pronghorn tag, and you got to take your SCAR, be like, psh, let's do it. I have no issues with it. Does it weigh a little bit more than my bolt guns? Yeah, it does, but I also have really light bolt guns. It weighs less than some bolt guns, than a lot of bolt guns. It's as accurate as any bolt gun that I own. It's not probably as accurate as somebody's bench rest, 6mm bench rest championship gun, but it's really accurate. I'm talking with factory ammo that you can buy at Walmart, if you can still buy ammo at Walmart. The SCAR stands for, if you don't know, the Special Operation Forces Combat Assault Rifle, SCAR. Per my one source, so by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, which is Wikipedia, says it came out in 2004. It was, I believe, developed for SOCOM for some of their requirements. I should specify there is both a SCAR Light and a SCAR Heavy. The SCAR 16 Light and the SCAR 17 Heavy. I am talking about the SCAR Heavy. Should have specified that in the beginning, but the SCAR Heavy in 308. It is also available in the 6.5 Creedmoor. It is also, I don't know how they did this, just a more modern design, I guess. It is the lightest we've talked about so far, and it also has the least recoil that I've shot out of these. And usually if you go one way, if you go lighter, you get more recoil with the same cartridge, but for some reason not in the SCAR. I don't know if it's because of polymer flexes or whatever. It's very mild recoiling. It's kind of known for that. Also, it has a very, very simple operating system. It's a piston similar to, and not exactly the same, but similar to an AK. It is a great gun. Its downside, really the only downside I know of, is the price. That being said, I do believe that CZ Bren is kind of a copy of it. How good a copy it is, I don't know. I've never owned one. I knew a couple of guys that did own them, and they liked them, but they didn't own a SCAR to compare it to. And now that means that if CZ's making it, the patent's probably expired or close to it whenever they patented that gun. You might see some other variants. You may even see somebody in Turkey making one. I don't know. Don't know if I'd trust that one. My general rule, if you don't know, is wait for something's out for 2 or 3 years to see if it has any issues. CZ in general makes really good stuff, so you're looking to get into the SCAR design without spending the money. Maybe give it some time, see if that one proves as reliable or as good, and then maybe look at it. SCAR has a Cold Hammer Forged chrome lined barrel, which I really like, which means I don't have to worry about it rusting on the inside of the barrel. Not only is it expensive, but the parts and accessories, there aren't a lot. It's kind of a niche market, so they're also expensive. Triggers are expensive. The trigger's nothing to write home about. It's a mil-spec trigger. I wanted to upgrade it when I got mine, and I think there were 2, and they were both around $300 and some for just a trigger. Also, it's kind of known as an optics killer. It comes with iron sights. You could use it with just the iron sights, but in my opinion, the iron sights were kind of designed to be backup iron sights. They're flip-up sights. They're good sights for backups, but it's really designed to be run with an optic, I believe. That being said, you can't really go cheap on the optic on this rifle because it's known as an optics killer. I took this rifle to a pretty crazy training course and beat the crap out of it. The rifle worked fine. I did break one optic. It was a Trijicon. It was a good optic. Whether the rifle broke it or I just broke it being hard on stuff, because I'm hard on stuff, especially in training. I did send it back to Trijicon. They did send me a brand new one. So that says something about Trijicon. But it is known as an optics killer. If you get this gun, don't go cheap on optic and don't go cheap on mounts. Anyway, I like that rifle, but I don't want to spend all day talking about it. The SCAR 17. Now, I might have said this SCAR 17 was kind of at the top of the hill but there might be a new Jack walking up that hill. And Jack may or may not stay up there, he may or may not come down. But that is the M5, recently announced as being adopted. Now this one, as I understand it, will be able to be switched to 308 pretty easily, but initially coming out in the new 6.8 or the 277 Fury. The coolest thing about that rifle, in my opinion, is the hybrid case design operating at crazy high pressures, but it's, for all intents and purposes, based on a 308 case size and shape, necked down to 270 or .277. Is the M5. It is not the same operating system as an M16. Ergonomics, I didn't mention how the SCAR, but the SCAR also has pretty much the same ergonomics as an M16. So does the M5. The M5 and the SCAR do not share any kind of similarity in operating system. As I understand it, have handled the SIG Rattler, which I do believe the M5 is a beefed up version of the SIG Rattler, much like the AR-10 is a beefed up version of the AR-15. So I am familiar in that, guys. Like, I'm familiar with how it works. I've never handled an M5, so I'm not going to pass judgment on it. I don't have any real world first-hand experience with an M5. So I'm not going to really speak to the quality of it. I've looked at the operating system. A lot of guns are based on that AR-18 kind of operating system, if you want to call this that same thing. Kind of that dual spring, rotating, locking lug bolt design. It's a good design. A lot of guns are based on it. That operating system can work very well as long as it's done to the right tolerances and the materials are right and all that stuff. Again, I don't have experience with the M5. It is kind of an exciting time. It's been a long time that the military has used the M16 and its variants, M4, whatever, and the 5.56 cartridge. So let's see what's going to happen with this 277 Fury and the M5. I assume that because of this, that platform and that operating system and the companies coming out making copies of it or things very similar to it, that's generally what happens. So we'll see what happens with this. But very exciting. Again, you know me, I don't like to be a beta tester in a gunfight, so I'm not going to run out and get one anytime soon. Nor it would have to offer something crazy for me to get rid of the SCAR 17. The one that I have, I've kind of bonded with it. I don't know that I would want an M5 over the SCAR. That being said, this M5 wasn't in the running when I was looking for a go-to when I was the commander of a tactical team doing stuff in the private sector. You know, vehicle-borne threats were a thing. Being a designated marksman kind of role was a thing. I chose the SCAR 17 because it was the best option I believed at the time. It may be called upon for a CQB role, it may be called upon for a designated marksman role. It may be called upon to fill in both those things on the same shift. So you never really know. Pretty dynamic environment. Why I call that gun kind of my modern scout rifle. With that, that's the summation of your big bore battle rifles. If I didn't mention your favorite or the one you think should be the best or left something out, you can always contact me at goodshepherdtraining.com. If you want everybody to see it, you can always leave a review if it's on iTunes or a platform that lets you leave a review. Anyway, that being said, goodshepherdtraining.com. Your tactical tip of the day not only applies to big bore battle rifles, but pretty much any kind of shooting. If you don't have a silver paint marker, a silver Sharpie, I'd say silver, it could be gold, it could be white, but something that I think a Sharpie, a regular black Sharpie, should be part of your range kit pretty much all the time. It gets used all the time. For writing on camo guns, on pretty much any color that's likely to be on your rifle, you're going to be able to see that silver. You can mark your set screws, you can mark your dope, you can mark your turrets, you can mark your iron sights where they are, all that stuff. Come in super handy with all the money you're going to spend on a big bore battle rifle and all that stuff. Have a silver Sharpie. Might save you a lot of frustration or make the difference between a hit and a miss. Having to put a bunch more rounds down range to re-zero something if it got knocked out of spec than just looking at the mark and realigning it and confirming it. That's your tactical tip of the day, a silver paint marker for your kit. The tactical verse of the day, one of my favorites. 2 Samuel, also I'll mention very similar, is mentioned in Psalm 18. For by you I can run against a troop. By my God I can leap over a wall. As for God, his way is perfect. The word of the Lord is proven. He is a shield to all who trust in him. For who is God except the Lord, and who is rock except our God? God is my strength and power. He makes my way perfect. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer. He sets me on high places. He teaches my hands to make war, so that my arms can bend a bow of bronze. With that, gunfighters, have a blessed day.